The millionaire invited the black cleaning lady as a joke, but she arrived like a diva, and what happened next left everyone in absolute shock when they finally discovered who she really was. The main hall of the Blackwood Mansion in Beverly Hills burst with malicious laughter as Victoria Sterling descended the marble staircase, wearing a dress worth more than most people's annual salary. But it wasn't admiration. It was cruel mockery. "Look who decided to show up," Richard Blackwood whispered to his guests, raising his glass of Dom Perignon champagne. Victoria was 35 years old, and never in her wildest dreams had she imagined stepping into that ballroom as a guest, even if it was just for a joke. For 2 years, she had scrubbed and polished every inch of that mansion, always invisible, always silent, watching the rich treat each other with rehearsed charm while treating her like she was part of the furniture. The invitation had arrived 3 days earlier, delivered with a smile she recognized all too well. "Charity gala on Saturday," Richard had said, handing her a gold envelope. "Dress code, maximum elegance. You surely have something suitable in your wardrobe, don't you?" Laughter had echoed down the hallway. It was an obvious trap, a setup meant to humiliate her publicly and remind her of her place in front of California's high society. Richard had even invited social reporters to witness what he called an educational moment. "Let's make a bet," Richard said to his wife Helena as Victoria vacuumed the day before the gala. $100,000 says she won't have the nerve to show up. And if she does, she'll be the entertainment for the night. Helena laughed cruelly. "You're terrible, Richard. She'll probably borrow something, feel out of place, and leave in 15 minutes. But Richard didn't know 2 fundamental things about Victoria Temps. First, she had grown up in halls like this long before she ever cleaned them. Second, some storms don't destroy you. They teach you how to dance in the rain. As Victoria entered the hall under mocking stares, her back remained straight, her gaze calm. She moved with a quiet confidence, like someone carrying secrets powerful enough to turn that entire world upside down. Each step was deliberate, graceful, as if part of a choreography she'd been rehearsing her entire life. "My God, she actually came," Patricia Weston, a senator's wife, whispered to her friend. "And look at that dress. Where did she get it?" "She probably rented it and will pay in 10 installments, sneered Vivian Chambers, the daughter of an oil magnate, masking her own insecurity with cruelty. What none of them knew was that Victoria hadn't rented, borrowed, or bought the dress. She had pulled it from her own past, a past Richard Blackwood would have done anything to erase if he'd known it existed. Richard approached her, arrogance radiating as his billionaire friends flanked him. He was confident. He had orchestrated this moment as a public display of power. "Victoria, what a pleasant surprise. I never doubted you'd come. After all, when a person like you receives an invitation to an event like this, a person like me?" Victoria's calm voice sliced through the air like silk drawn over a blade. "Go on, Richard. Finish your sentence." For a split second, something in her tone made him hesitate. She didn't sound like the submissive maid he was used to, but arrogance quickly returned. "Well, you know, someone who doesn't usually belong in this environment. You must be feeling quite intimidated by all this elegance." Victoria smiled, not nervously, not submissively, a dangerously serene smile that made some guests instinctively stop laughing. "Intimidated?" she repeated softly, locking eyes with him. Richard unconsciously took a step back. "No, Richard. I'm exactly where I've always belonged." The silence that followed lasted only seconds, but it was enough to change the entire atmosphere. There was something about the way she spoke, moved, and occupied that space that defied every expectation. Richard cleared his throat, trying to regain control. "Well, I hope you enjoy the evening. I'm sure it'll be educational for you." "Oh, I'm sure it will be educational for all of us," Victoria replied, scanning the crowd slowly, as if mentally cataloging every face. "If you're enjoying this story of twists and justice, don't forget to subscribe, because what those privileged guests didn't know was that Victoria carried a secret so explosive it would turn their night of planned humiliation into the greatest lesson on prejudice Beverly Hills had ever witnessed. Richard was having more fun than expected. Victoria hadn't fled in shame. Instead, she stood her ground with unnerving confidence. "Everyone!" Richard called, tapping his spoon against his glass. The room quieted. "I'd like to introduce our special guest tonight, Victoria, our dedicated cleaning lady." Laughter crashed through the room like a wave. Cell phones flashed. Socialites snapped photos for their feeds, already crafting cruel captions. "Richard," Helena murmured, faking concern. "Don't you think you're being a little cruel?" "Cruel?" Richard laughed. "I'm giving her the opportunity of a lifetime. When else would someone like her ever attend something like this?" Victoria stood motionless in the center, all eyes on her. But instead of embarrassment, there was calm in her expression, a serenity born from someone who had weathered far worse storms. Patricia Weston approached with a venomous smile, friends in tow. "Victoria, dear, how long did it take to choose that dress? It must have been so hard finding something suitable." "Actually," Victoria replied calmly, "this dress has a special history. It belonged to my mother, her mother." Vivian scoffed. "Where did she get a dress like that?" "A thrift store?" Victoria smiled again, but this time it was dangerous. "My mother wore this dress the last time she attended a ballroom like this. 20 years ago, when she was still Victoria Temps Blackwood." The silence was deafening. Guests exchanged glances, realizing this wasn't just banter anymore. Richard, mid-laugh with his friends, froze and turned slowly. "What did you say?" "Temps Blackwood," Victoria repeated, her voice sharp. Funny how some people choose to forget their own family history. Richard's face paled. Helena clutched his arm, sensing something was terribly wrong. "You're delirious," Richard said, but his voice cracked. "This isn't a game, Richard," Victoria said, stepping closer as guests instinctively stepped back. "It's history." "Our history." "The history you tried to erase when it was convenient to pretend certain people didn't exist. Cell phones kept recording, but now for very different reasons." Whispers spread through the hall like wildfire. Helena pulled Richard's arm. "What is she talking about?" "She's lying," Richard muttered, hands trembling. "She's just a deranged employee looking for attention." Victoria reached into her purse and pulled out an object that made guests gasp. A ring, not just any ring, but the Blackwood family engagement ring, engraved with the crest and set with the unmistakable blue sapphire passed down for generations. "This ring," Victoria said, holding it up, "was given to my mother by her father, Henry Blackwood, my grandfather, the man you told everyone died without an heir." Richard's composure began to crumble. "Where did you get this? How dare you steal—" "Steal!" Victoria laughed coldly. "You can't steal what's rightfully yours by birthright?" "My God," Patricia whispered to Vivian. "Do you think she's telling the truth?" "Impossible," Vivian muttered, though less confidently. "Richard would have told us if he had a cousin." "Cousin?" Victoria turned to them. "No, dear, I'm not his cousin." She locked eyes with Richard. "I'm his half-sister." The room exploded into murmurs and gasps. Richard looked as if he'd been struck. "This is ridiculous," he shouted, but his voice cracked. "Henry Blackwood had an affair with my mother, Isabella," Victoria continued relentlessly. "She was the family's piano teacher. He supported us. Until he died." Helena covered her mouth in shock. "You," Victoria said, pointing at Richard, "chose to pretend we didn't exist. You cut off our allowance, sold our house, and left us in poverty." "I had no obligation," Richard began. Victoria cut him off. "No obligation to your father's family? Interesting, considering you inherited 100% of the fortune that should have been divided between us." Her words hit like a sledgehammer. Guests began to distance themselves from Richard. "Prove it," Richard said desperately. "Anyone can make up a story." Victoria's smile turned predatory. "Oh, Richard, did you really think I'd come without proof?" She raised her phone and signaled toward the entrance. 3 people entered. Diane Morrison, Beverly Hills' most respected investigative journalist; David Chun, a top inheritance lawyer; and Dr. Hamilton, the family's private physician. Richard staggered. "Dr. Hamilton, what are you doing here?" Helena whispered. The doctor stepped into the center, voice steady. 20 years ago, I was forced to sign a falsified death certificate. Henry Blackwood did not die of natural causes. He was slowly poisoned with arsenic over months. Gasps filled the hall. Diane Morrison raised a hand. Please keep your phones on. This is an official confession being recorded for legal purposes. You're crazy, Richard shouted. My father died of heart problems. No, Dr. Hamilton said firmly. He found out about the money you'd been embezzling. He changed his will to include Victoria and was about to expose you when he fell ill. Tears welled in Victoria's eyes. After 2 decades, the truth was finally being spoken. David Chun opened his briefcase. This blood sample was tested last week. Arsenic levels were fatal. You're making this up! Richard screamed, losing control. It's a conspiracy to ruin me. Diane Morrison stepped forward. Mr. Blackwood, I have transcripts of 5 conversations where you threatened Dr. Hamilton between 2003 and 2004. Victoria's voice sliced through the chaos. Richard, you didn't just kill our father. You stole 20 years of my life. I didn't kill anyone! Richard shouted, pointing his finger wildly in every direction. You're all lying! Then explain this, Victoria said coldly as she connected her phone to the mansion's sound system. A recording began to play. Richard's voice was unmistakable. Hamilton, you're going to keep your mouth shut about anything strange you found in the old man's blood. If you open your mouth, I guarantee you'll never work as a doctor again. And as for that woman and her bastard daughter, they'll have to fend for themselves. The silence that followed was absolute. Even those who had defended Richard moments ago now shunned him as if he were radioactive. Helena stared at her husband in sheer horror. Richard, you really did this? 20 years? Victoria screamed, her composure cracking for the first time. 20 years of cleaning my own father's blood off the hands of his killer. She took a deep breath, regaining her deadly calm. You want to know how I got all this evidence? I didn't come to work here by accident. I applied specifically for this position. I spent 2 years preparing, gaining access to the house, collecting everything I needed. Richard tried one last, desperate gambit. Even if all that is true, it doesn't change anything. The inheritance was distributed years ago. David Chun smiled for the first time. Actually, Mr. Blackwood, when there's evidence of murder, all assets can be redistributed according to the original will. And we have a copy of Henry Blackwood's actual will. Victoria stepped closer. Richard, now cornered, leaned back against the wall like a trapped animal. Do you know what my biggest mistake was, Richard? She asked. It was believing you would change on your own. Please. Richard whispered, all arrogance gone. Helena, the children. This will destroy our family. You destroyed our family the moment you chose money over justice, Victoria replied. Richard collapsed into an armchair, completely defeated. His transformation from arrogant millionaire to exposed criminal had taken less than 2 hours. Victoria looked at him one last time. He was broken, but this was only the beginning. What Richard didn't realize, and would soon discover in the worst possible way, was that Victoria had spent years gathering evidence, not only about her father's death, but about all the financial crimes, blackmail, and corruption Richard had committed over the decades. She had woven a web of justice so meticulous that his downfall would be spectacularly complete. The next 2 hours turned the most exclusive gala in Beverly Hills into the biggest scandal California high society had ever witnessed live. Richard was now sitting on the floor of the ballroom, his back against the wall, watching his entire life unravel in real time. Diane Morrison connected her laptop to the mansion's projection system. Documents, photos, and recordings appeared on the giant screen for all the guests to see. This is a bank transfer of $200,000 from Richard Blackwood's personal account to Dr. Hamilton, dated 3 days after Henry Blackwood's death, Diane narrated as the image appeared. The memo on the transfer reads, "Silence is golden." Helena stood on the other side of the room, as far away from her husband as possible, crying silently as she processed 20 years of lies. And this, Diane continued, is a recording of Richard talking to his accountant about how to hide the company's embezzlement. Richard's voice echoed through the room. I need you to make the numbers dance. If anyone finds out I've taken out $20 million over the last 5 years, I'm ruined. Blame it on market fluctuations, expansion costs, whatever. Patricia Weston whispered to her friend. My God, he stole from his own company. Victoria remained in the center of the room, calm as the eye of a hurricane, watching each revelation systematically destroy the life of the man who had murdered her father. David Chun approached with a new folder. Mr. Blackwood, in addition to the criminal charges, I must inform you that Miss Thames is filing a $50 million civil suit against you for wrongful death and misappropriation of inheritance. $50 million? Richard looked up with glazed eyes. I don't have $50 million. No, Victoria said softly. But your company is worth $120 million, and half of that has always been mine by right. Diane Morrison continued her devastating presentation. We also have evidence that Richard blackmailed at least 5 local politicians, bribed 3 judges, and diverted charity funds to personal accounts. Each new revelation drew gasps of horror from the guests. People who had arrived as Richard's friends now moved away as if he carried a contagious disease. Victoria, Richard said in a broken voice. Please, you got what you wanted. Stop this! Victoria knelt in front of him, locking eyes with the man who had stolen her life. Richard, you killed our father. You stole my family, my inheritance, my dignity. You made me clean his blood off your hands for 2 years. I can make it up to you, he whispered desperately. There's no making up for 20 years of injustice, Victoria replied with haunting calm. But there are consequences. Helena's phone rang. It was one of their children calling from college. Mom, is everything okay? Are they saying on the internet that Dad is a murderer? Helena looked at Richard with utter disgust. Your own children are finding out what kind of monster you are on social media. Richard tried to stand, but his legs gave way. Helena, please. The children. No! Helena screamed, silencing the entire room. You don't mention our children. You've shamed them forever. Dr. Hamilton approached Victoria. Miss Temps, I must inform you that I've already contacted the police. Richard will be arrested later today for murder. Murder, fraud, blackmail, tax evasion, Victoria said. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison. She turned to the guests, who watched her with a mix of admiration and fear. I want everyone to understand one thing. I didn't do this for revenge. I did this for justice. For all the people who have been trampled on by men like Richard Blackwood. Patricia Weston approached hesitantly. Victoria, we're so sorry. We didn't know. You knew I was treated like a subhuman, Victoria replied firmly. You laughed. You participated. The only difference now is that you know I have more money than you. The sound of sirens echoed outside. The police had arrived. Richard looked at Victoria one last time. You've destroyed my life. No, Victoria said, standing tall with unshakable dignity. You destroyed your own life the moment you chose evil. I just made sure the truth came out. As the police officers entered to arrest Richard, Victoria walked out onto the balcony. Outside, dozens of reporters were waiting. TV cameras, photographers, journalists. The story had already spread. Helena joined her. Victoria, I really didn't know anything. I know, Victoria said gently. You were also a victim of his. What's going to happen now? Helena asked. Victoria looked out at the glittering city below. Now, Helena, justice will finally be served, and maybe Beverly Hills will learn that class has nothing to do with a bank account. As Richard was led away in handcuffs, through the same hall where he had tried to humiliate her only hours earlier, Victoria felt something she hadn't felt in 20 years. Peace. What Richard would discover in the next few hours in jail was that Victoria had planned every detail not only of his downfall, but also of the complete rebuilding of her own life. The Blackwood Empire now had a new heir, one who would use that power to protect the very people Richard had spent decades trampling on. 6 months later, Victoria Temps Blackwood sat in Richard's former office, now completely renovated. The walls that once displayed trophies of arrogance now held certificates from social projects and photographs of employees who had been promoted from entry-level positions to executive roles. Richard had been sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. The charges included murder, corporate fraud, blackmail, and tax evasion. His personal fortune had been confiscated to compensate his victims. Victoria was just one of many he had wronged. "Miss Temps Blackwood," said Amanda, her new executive assistant, who had previously worked as a cleaner in the building. "Forbes magazine is here for the interview about the company's transformation." Victoria smiled. In just 6 months, she had increased the company's profits by 40%, and she did it by doing something her predecessor never understood, treating employees like human beings. Fair wages, promotions based on genuine merit, and a respectful work environment had created a level of productivity that Richard could never achieve with his toxic leadership. Helena divorced him immediately and moved out of state with her children. Before she left, she sought out Victoria to apologize in person. "You could have destroyed us completely," Helena said with tears in her eyes. "But you chose to protect my children. I will never forget your generosity." "Children don't pay for their parents' sins," Victoria replied softly. "They deserve the chance to be better people than he was." Dr. Hamilton now worked as a medical consultant for the company, offering free care to all employees. "I never thought I'd have the courage to do the right thing," he admitted during a meeting. "You taught me that it's never too late to find our dignity." Patricia Weston and Vivian Chambers had also tried to reach out to Victoria in the weeks following the scandal, but she kept them at a polite distance. "You laughed at me when you saw me as inferior. Now you want my friendship because you've seen my bank account. That says everything about you," she told them with quiet firmness. Victoria's story went viral worldwide. Invitations poured in from universities, asking her to speak about leadership and social justice. But Victoria preferred to focus on the real work. "I don't want to be famous for suffering," she explained in a rare interview. "I want to be known for what I built afterward." Under her leadership, the company began sponsoring scholarships for employees' children, launched a microcredit program for entrepreneurs in underserved communities, and created the largest domestic violence support fund in California. Then, on a quiet afternoon, Victoria received a letter from prison. It was from Richard. "Victoria, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need you to know that you taught me something. The person I became was a monster. I spend every day trying to understand how I turned into someone capable of killing his own father for money. My children asked about you during their last visit. They want to meet the aunt who protected the family when their father failed." Victoria kept the letter but never replied. Forgiveness was a personal journey, and for her, justice had already been served. During an interview with Forbes, the journalist asked, "Some people say your revenge was too cruel. What do you say to that?" "Revenge would have been to do to him what he did to me," Victoria replied calmly. "Justice is ensuring that he pays for the crimes he committed and that other people don't suffer what I suffered. There's a fundamental difference between the two. And what advice would you give to people facing similar injustices?" the journalist continued. Victoria looked out the window, watching employees enjoy lunch in the company garden, a space that now offered them respect and dignity. "The best revenge is not to destroy those who hurt you," she said. "It's to build something so great that the injustice you suffered becomes only the first chapter in a story of triumph." That night, Victoria returned home, not to the small apartment where she once nurtured her dreams of justice, but to a warm, comfortable house. There she was raising 2 orphaned girls who, like her, needed a second chance at life. As she helped them with their homework, she thought of the father she had never truly known, but whose blood ran through her veins. Henry Blackwood would have been proud. Proud to see that his daughter not only recovered what was stolen from her, but transformed a company built on exploitation into a symbol of opportunity and dignity. Victoria's real victory wasn't dethroning Richard. It was proving that when power is built on justice instead of fear, it multiplies and uplifts everyone around it. Richard had tried to humiliate a cleaning lady, and ended up discovering that he had underestimated a force far greater than himself. More importantly, he learned a lesson he should have known all along. Dignity cannot be bought, inherited, or stolen. It's earned through the choices we make when no one is watching. If this story of justice touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that good always wins when you have the right strategy, and that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone has chosen to ignore.